Education is one of the many sectors the government is in the process of reviewing with the intention of making significant changes to the way Kiwi kids are taught. Now, libertarian think tank The New Zealand Initiative is offering up what it says is a new tool that will be enable the real performance of schools to be properly measured for the first time, meaning we can learn what the best education strategies are and ensure all pupils benefit from them. Here to unpack how it works and why it should be applied is New Zealand Initiative Chief Economist Eric Crampton. Good morning, Eric. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Great. We'll get to the findings shortly because they are quite fascinating. But first of all, I just wanted to unpack exactly what this is because it's you've taken information from the integrated data infrastructure, which makes you want to go to sleep pretty quickly. But it is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've all known that the NCEA league tables are a bit nonsense. You'll always see decile 9 and 10 schools up at the top. They're serving fairly privileged communities. You'll see decile 1 and 2 schools down at the bottom. They have a much harder job to be doing in a lot of cases. We know that, and we know that Statistics New Zealand has one of the best data infrastructures in the world. So in the back end, in a Stats New Zealand data lab, they've linked up all of the administrative data sets that we have. So we've got information on every student that's gone through NCEA over the past decade, about 400,000 of them. We're able to link them to their parents and everything we know about their parents. So mother's education, father's education, mother's income, father's income, prison records, child, youth, and family notifications over 6 different categories. There's a pretty comprehensive list of things that are in those back-end databases and that we know will probably have an effect on how good a job a school can do. So we are able then to statistically pull out the effects of all of those things that are really outside of the school's control to see what the real effect is of each individual school. And when we do that, we find some pretty interesting results.
How unique is this to be able to do that?
Well, there have been similar efforts elsewhere, but nobody has quite the comprehensive data that New Zealand's put together. So if you look at Australia, or New South Wales, has done a fair bit of work that's comparable to this, but doesn't have quite the set of family background characteristics we're able to use. In the United States, there's all kinds of work that's similar to this, but they don't use quite the same method. They don't have the same background data on the parents, but they do have a lot better data testing, on standardized testing the students. So we don't have that, but we do have much better data on the students' backgrounds.
I mean, it sounds like there's just so much information being chucked to you. What is it that you're able to kind of find by piecing all of these bits of the puzzle together?
Great. So what we're able to do is identify which schools are doing far better than we'd expect given the communities that they're serving, or worse than we'd expect given the communities that they're serving. One of the bottom lines is that about 80% of New Zealand schools are performing pretty much on track with each other, so there's not much difference between those. But if we look at the top and the bottom, there's some interesting results. So we find that there's just a huge pile of decile 1 and 2 schools that are in the top quartile of performance, in the top 25%. So it's something like 42% of the decile 1 and 2 schools are in that league of very top performers. And we find some underperformance in decile 7 and 8, which we were a little bit surprised by. What we could do with this tool, or if the ministry wanted to, you could use it for identifying which schools do a particularly good job and with communities that might have a more difficult time at other schools, and then send ERO, the Education Review Office, in to see what's actually going on. It might be something that the school is doing differently, or it might be something about that community that's really nothing to do with the school. But we'll never know until we know where to shine the spotlight. Now we know where to shine the spotlight, ERO can go in and do the next step. We can also get reports out to can you imagine, every principal in the country and every school board in the country getting a report saying, your school is doing a fantastic job for its Pacifica students, but you're falling over a little bit with these other students. That's completely feasible now. It'd take maybe a week's work tops for the ministry to do it.
So is it able to explain why some of these schools are performing well or performing poorly?
We can't yet because we don't have that data in the data lab, but what we could do with it is if the ministry were rolling out different types of new practice, so in these different modern learning environments or different changes in pedagogy, it could track the effects of any of these interventions. So the government is now trialing, for example, school lunch programs in a few schools. You'd be able to see whether there's any effect of that on the outcomes for the students after having separated out all of these family background effects. You can use the tool for that kind of evaluation of the different projects that the government might want to try. And you could also have it for schools themselves. If they were able to keep a running tally over time of how well they're doing, and they know that they've changed some bit of practice, they might be able to see whether it's had any effect.
Thank you so much for your time. That's Eric Crampton from the New Zealand Initiative.
I'm just a little confused with this. So they want to get the data about how a school's performing after they've separated out family background. So they're going to ignore what is happening to the kids of the community completely and see if the school measures up compared to what it kind of should, because if they're in a low decile area.
It's a little bit of a nature versus nurture argument, isn't it? So where do how much does family and socioeconomic influences impact kids' education, and how much of it comes from the schools themselves? They're kind of saying so much of it comes from the schools themselves, and we should just be looking at that as the information, which... Yeah.
But I just don't think you can take that out of kids. Kids are their community, right? And then you take that out, and then you can basically make an argument to see, look, our education system is equal opportunity. But it's not, because some people need more work.
And some people need more help, yeah. And you've got kids, remember, that are going to school in this country without breakfast. You know, so how...
Without shoes.
Yeah, without shoes. So how are they getting the best start to their day, you know, at school?
So it almost feels like they're trying to make an excuse not to give low decile schools more funding.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. We're talking about Spark.